Now, not only do we have benefic, gentle planets and malefic, stressful planets, but even within these, we have friendship between planets and we have enemies. And these two planets can be friends or enemies between each other. And this is where we start to mix interpretations. For example, in Vedic astrology, Venus and Saturn are friends. If Saturn is aspecting Venus, then Venus is damaged by the malefic nature of Saturn, but it's worth it because what's happening is that it's cleaning out and disciplining Venus so that Venus doesn't enjoy useless things, which, Venus would like to enjoy everything. But when Saturn is in aspect with Venus, because Saturn's a malefic, it takes away some of Venus's enjoyment. But Saturn is a friend to Venus. So if Venus is well placed otherwise, and it's got a little bit of support so that it doesn't get bummed out by that malefic Saturn aspect, Venus is well served to have an aspect from its friend, Saturn. And it's actually a better thing. It's more good than bad, really. And so this is a layer of interpretation that's really more important. This is a very deep one, and this is something that the West has no idea about. I'm sure, again, if you want to take this trip with me, don't take my word for it. Try to see the logic that I'm conveying to you through the inherent wisdom of the symbols of astrology that the Vedic people understand. So there's kind of two, this isn't, I'm going to show the two groups of general friends. Planets are campy, apparently, and they like to be in a certain camp. Now, this is like a vague description of the duality that's going on here. The planets related to the self within rule the fire and water signs. Sun rules Leo, Moon rules Cancer, Mars rules Aries and Scorpio, fire and water, and then Jupiter rules Sagittarius and Pisces, fire and water. These have to do kind of within ourselves. Whereas the material embodied aspect of the soul, the communicators who dedicate themselves to the world outside of the needs of the self. This is Venus, the planet of relationships, Mercury, the planet of communication, Saturn, the planet of duty and responsibility to time invested in the world. So this is the groupings of friendship and enmity. Now, this isn't like exactly where the friendships of the planets come, but this has to do with it. And I'm just giving you the consciousness of the friendship of these planets. Now, planets in either of these camps often, like for the most part, will get along with each other. Venus's friends are Mercury and Saturn. Mercury's friends are Venus. I believe Saturn is also a friend. Oh, no, it's not. Saturn's neutral. Good. So, for the most part, these guys are all friends. And you can see the logic as to why. Venus rules Earth and Air, Taurus and Libra. Mercury rules Earth and Air, Virgo and Gemini. Saturn rules Earth and Air, Capricorn and Aquarius. Now, the Sun rules Fire, Leo, and then the Moon rules Cancer, Water. Mars rules Fire and Air, and Jupiter rules Fire and Air. So that's why the Sun, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter are all friends, and when they conjunct each other, they're delighted. They actually gain. Again, even though Mars is a malefic, when Mars is with Jupiter or the Sun, not so much the Moon. The Moon has its own thing going on. The Moon and Mercury are the weird underdogs that blend between these two camps. But for the most part, Mars does well to aspect the Sun, and it does well to aspect Jupiter. So these guys are friends. And this is, as I said, this is a huge, important dimension of Vedic astrology that the West has not grasped. So these are the groupings, and then for your reference, this is the consolidated table. We can see the Sun as a planet has the Moon, Mars, and Jupiter for its friends. Its enemies are Venus and Saturn. And then Mercury is neutral to the Sun. Interestingly, the Mercury and the Sun have a special relationship together, and Mercury is, in fact, the Sun is a friend to Mercury. It has to do with the fact that the nervous system is well served to be close to the inherent heart of the spirit, because then we can speak our truth. But when the sun is in a Venus sign, like Taurus, then the sun is too focused on its comfort and not enough on pushing itself past its comfort. When the sun is in the sign of Saturn, it's focusing too much on responsibilities that are given to it rather than responsibilities that it takes from within its spirit, right? This is where this logic is coming from. Mars is basically the same thing. You could say the same thing about Mars, and you could say the same thing about Jupiter. Only the moon has no enemies. And here's another clue for you all. Jupiter is an enemy of nobody. If you look at all the enemies here, Jupiter, the great benefic, is an enemy to no one. So this friendship and enmity is very important. How does it manifest? Well, it manifests in aspects, and it manifests also when planets are in the sign of an enemy or a friend. So this is our same example chart. We've got our Capricorn here. So when a planet is in an enemy sign, it experiences starvation. In that case, it doesn't have what it needs to pursue its agenda. It makes sense, right? The planets are agents of our outgoing consciousness. Now, if you're if you're like a gardener, and you are, like, let's say Venus is this gardener person. Now, go and throw that gardener out in a battlefield where they have to pay attention and they have to make sure they don't get their head blown off. That gardener is used to just putting things out, planting things softly and slowly, and watching them grow. So if you take Venus and you put it inside, let's see, Venus's enemies is the sun, moon, and Mars. So this is a table that I got from somewhere else, and Mars is a debatable. I wouldn't call Mars an enemy of Venus. I don't know why that's in there. It's kind of frustrating, but whatever. Venus's enemies typically are the sun and the moon. Now, when you put Venus in the sun, this soft gardener is in a world where it now has to manage things in a hard, annoying way. This is the kind of the consciousness that's going on here. When a planet is in its enemy sign, it's starved. The agent of consciousness is not in a field that is conducive to its agenda. So this damages that planet. It damages the house that planet is supposed to be looking after. The example I've been given here is Mars. Mars is the one planet in this chart, and it's in the sign of Gemini, right? If we look at Mars, we notice that the only enemy Mars has is Mercury. So therefore, how this works is that Mars is in the sign of Gemini, ruled by its enemy Mercury. So Mars's instinctive grasping for what it needs is blocked by Gemini's instinct to think about managing its boundaries first. Mars is part of the self planets, right? We all need to be ourself first. We need to be strong in our roots in order to give our community our fruits. And Mars is one of those planets where it's you looking after yourself. So Mars is not going to do well generally in the camp of planets that communicate with other people outside of itself. I hope I'm doing these justice, but ultimately you can see the logic of these friendships. This Mars, by being in Gemini, it's in the sign of an enemy, and so it's starved. And this damages the houses that Mars is supposed to be looking after. In this case, Mars rules the 4th house and the 11th house, and so these are going to be damaged. The emotional grip of this person and how they use their emotions to channel their desires and objectives in life is going to get all screwed up by being in Gemini in the 6th house, because it's going to overthink where its emotions ought to be. And usually Mars is supposed to be instinctive about grasping them. Capricorn should be instinctive about how it grips its Mars, because if it thinks too much about it, it's already an earthy energy. It's not going to instinctively take its happiness, and it's going to become a very dry Capricorn. Now, when a planet's in a friend sign, it experiences delight. Its background psyche in that sign fits the agenda that it's trying to apply. This allows the house that planet's looking after to flourish. So let's see, the sun is in the sign of Cancer, and we notice that one of the sun's friends is the moon. So this is in a friendly sign. The sun's warrior nature finds a positive doorway to self-expression which matches the theme of the sun, the self. The sun, which is our inherent essential self, does better when it's kind of grabbing for itself. It is vitalized by being in the vicinity of objectives that relate to itself. This is what the sun likes. That's why notice that the sun is exalted in Aries. It's because the king is doing what it needs to do for its kingdom, and that's its primary goal. It's trying to push itself based on the best that it can do within itself. So the sun being in this camp, just like the sun being exalted in Aries, when the sun is in the camp of the self, it's happier. And that means that whatever the sun rules, in this case it's the 8th house, this sun's 8th house energy will be well served and delighted by being in the sign of Cancer. And what I wanted to say, I should have mentioned it, but too late, you know. Mars being in the sign of Gemini is blocked by Mercury, and it's blocked by Gemini's instinct to think about managing its boundaries first. That sort of thing is good for Venus, Mercury, or Saturn to do, but not Mars. Do you see the importance of that? So, next we'll be talking about aspects, but essentially what I wanted to convey there before we get into this is just to keep in mind what this is saying, that there's not only a relationship of the planet to the sign that it's in, and the lord of the sign that it's in, but there's also aspects. When the sun is conjunct Mars, or the sun is aspecting Mars, it's going to be a good thing. But when the sun is aspecting its enemy, Saturn, rather, the sun is an enemy to Saturn. The self is going to burn out the responsibilities and the necessary dutiful things that Saturn wants to do when the sun is too close to Saturn. They actually are both enemies to each other, and they both burn each other out, and it's never really considered to be a good thing.